Hi everyone, I'm Ashlee from Crinkly Quilts, and today we are going to be upcycling some jeans and making this cute, trendy patchwork pocket. So we're just gonna jump right in, and I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna measure our pocket. So I have a ruler right here, and I'm just gonna measure the widest portion of our it. So it is about 5 3/4 wide and about 5 3/4 tall. So when we make our pocket, we are going to want to make it about 1.5 inches larger on each side. So we're about 2.5 inches larger in total. So we're going to round up and say my pocket is 6 inches wide and 6 inches tall. So if we can make a patchwork piece that is 8.5 inches square, then that will give us enough room to tuck in the sides underneath and trim, and we'll have a lot of extra space to work with. So what I'm going to do is I am going to make my patches 1 inches total. So if you're not familiar with the world of quilting, there is a 1/4 inch seam on each side. So you'll lose a 1/2 inch from the original size. So I'm going to start with a bunch of 1.5 inch squares. So the final size of the square will be 1 inch. But before we go and sew that together, we are going to remove the pocket from our jeans. And this is the worst part. So get your seam ripper out and we're going to start. Now I did half of the work before because I thought, watching me remove a pocket with a seam ripper would be about as entertaining as watching paint dry. But this bar tack stitch right here is kind of the hardest part of getting these pockets off. So I thought I'd show you on one side how to do that. And essentially what you're going to do, you're going to try and pry so that you can see the thread. Stick your seam ripper in there and just try and bust 1 or 2 of those stitches. And then you'll start to be able to open it up even more. So continue to just get 1 or 2 of those threads, bust that stitch open, and keep going. Alrighty. Okay, try and be careful not to rip a hole in your jeans while you're doing this, or you're going to have to mend that hole before you do a pocket. So just keep working at busting those threads. I am making good progress right here. I've almost got that bar tack stitch removed. There we go. Pretty much got it there. Okay, so now that I got that bar tack stitch done, except for this side right there. There we go. That's pulled apart. Then these straight line stitches are pretty easy. You just kind of run your seam ripper along them and bust those out. right, we're almost done. Just a straightaway and then we're good. Oh. All right, so my pocket is now off. As you can see, it was very obvious where my pocket was, but if you want to, you can take a like water soluble pencil or something and just outline your pocket. That way you know where to put it back. All right, so as we said, my pocket is about 6 inches wide and 6 inches tall. And so if I want my patchwork to be 1.5 inches wider on each, or 2.5 inches wider total, then it would be about 8.5 inches for patchwork. So that would be 8 1-inch squares by 8 1-inch squares. So I have 64 1.5-inch squares in here to make an 8.5-inch patchwork. So let's go to our machine and start piecing some patchwork. Alrighty. So I'm just going to start with, I'm going to put a bunch of squares right over here so I can see them. I like to keep my needle in the down position as I sew because I like to chain piece. And if you don't know what chain piecing is, it's essentially where you sew everything together and then just keep it all together until you're all done sewing it. So I'm just going to pick any 2 squares. Oh, and I should mention, I have a very short stitch length. It is at a 1 to 1.5 is where I like it for this, just to make sure that everything is secure, because you're wearing these on your bum. So they're going to get worn a little bit. So we're just going to start sewing pieces together. And I'm going to do 4 rows right now. So 4 rows of 8. That will be half of our, there's 2. Three, and 1 more. 4. Okay, and cut my threads. And I bring it back to the top, open that up, and we're going to add another row. One. And 3. Now I'm sewing my pieces right side together so that when I open them up, the right side will be out. And I am just kind of sewing them together any which way I want. I didn't really plan out what my patchwork would look like, but you certainly can. Now I'm using the 1/4 inch piecing foot, and I'm just sewing 1/4 inch seam allowances for every single one of these. So 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to add our next section. So we have 3 together, we want 8, so let's add another section. All right, there we go. That's half, and we have 4 more to add. All right, you're at 5. Let's do this nice green right here. All right, I got in the zone and I lost count of what number we're on. Oh, one more section. We're almost there. Oh. All right, last one. Oh, no, one's too much. There we go. Great, there we go. There is half of our little quilt block. So let's go take it back to the cutting table and we'll go from there. Oh, hold on. There we go. Okay, so here we have our little patchwork that we just made. And so it's all stuck together now because I just chain pieced it. So I'm going to take my rotary cutter and I'm going to break them apart carefully, just cutting those threads in between the rows. You can use scissors for this if you're not as brave as I am to just take a rotary cutter near your fabric. Okay, let me make sure this is nice and hot. We are. Okay, so we're gonna, that one didn't break apart. Make sure those did. Okay, we're gonna press our seams. Move this over so you can see what I'm doing. So we want our seams of our patchwork to nest. And what that means is that one row, so these rows will be sewn together. One row's seams we want to go right to left, and the other row's seams we want to go left to right. That way, when we flip them over together, the seams, one seam will be going one direction and the other seam will go in the other direction, and then we'll have a nice pretty point. And I'll show you what that looks like because I have the other half done. So you'll see, let's see if I can get you really close, how one seam is going this way and then this seam is going that way. And then on the other side, we have a nice beautiful point right there. So let's press our blocks. So have it laid out. And I'm going to have these two rows seams going right to left. So we're just going to flip them over. Take our iron and just press those seams right to left. There we go, nice and flat. Put that guy back, and we'll do this one. All right, right to left. There we go. Now these two seams we're going to have going the opposite direction. So I'm going to flip it and press that the opposite direction, or the same direction, but this row's the opposite way. So it ends up going the correct direction. So these seams are going that way, these seams are going this way, these seams are going this way as well. And now we want these seams to go this way. So we'll press, wait, am I doing it right? I just second guessed myself. Yeah, this way. Okay. Oof, that happens sometimes, even for someone who is as experienced as I am at pressing seams. Sometimes you just question yourself. Alrighty. There we go. So now we are going to take these back to our sewing machine, and we're going to sew these two rows together and these two rows together, and then we'll press the seams open and then sew the two pieces together and press that seam open as well. So let's head back to the sewing machine. Okay. So as you can see, because our seams are in opposite directions, they are just gonna sandwich together perfectly. And you can pin this if you like. I am not much of a pinner. I just like to stick them together and then go from there. And then every time we come to a new intersection, I just make sure those seams are coming together nicely. And I get through that one into the next one. Okay, there's one done. We're going to do this one now.
All right, and we're just gonna break these two guys apart and go press them open.
All right. So we're just gonna open our piece, and then I just with my fingers get that seam started. And then, my goodness, hands work. There we go. And just get that seam pressed open. All right, there's one piece. Okay, so somebody asked, have you tried to keep chain stitching together without snipping threads, iron, and then just sew the rows? I've seen it done a while back and was wondering pros and cons, if any. I have not tried that. I have also seen it and been curious about that, but I always am hesitant to try that. One, because I feel like the threads, if you don't snip them and then you sew them together, like if there's like a loop or something, it'll stick out. And then I don't like cutting threads at the very end. I find it annoying step of the process of quilting. And so I just don't want to have threads poking out through my quilt top, and that always worries me. But I have not tried it. I have seen it done. If you do try it, just let me know how it works, because I am interested in that. Okay, so I have two pieces done. These seams are going this way. These seams down here are going this way. We are going to put them together and then just sew it, press our seam open again, and then we'll sew that to this piece that I have already made. So then it'll be our 8.5 by 8.5 inch block, or little quilt. So let's go to the sewing machine with this guy real quick.
Okay, let's go press this seam open.
Okay, let's see how good I did at not having two of the same color next to each other. I did okay. Look at that, guys. It's gonna look super cute. Okay, let's sew these two pieces together now at the sewing machine.
All right, let's press this thing.
Okay, now I did a terrible job because I forgot to check what directions my seams were on the previous little thing I made, the other half, but it's okay. We're just gonna press it and just deal with it. My seams were still, I was still able to make my seams nest by pushing them down. Okie dokie. Get this wool mat out of the way. All right, so here we have our little pocket patchwork, and we're going to lay it right side down. And here's my pocket. Let me make sure my strawberries are in the right direction. Yep, that is. We're going to try and lay the pocket kind of in the center. And as you can see, we have lots of extra room around the pocket for trimming and such, which we're going to do right now. So from the top of the pocket, what we want to do is be able to like fold it down like this, so that when you stick your hand in the pocket, there's not going to be a raw edge right here, and you're not going to be like fraying fabric or anything. So try and keep it straight on there. I'm going to do 1.5 inches from the top, which is essentially the top of this. So I'm just going to let that slide because it's essentially the top right there. And then I'm going to trim 1/2 inch from each of the sides of the pocket. So just 1/2 inch away. I'm going to trim that. So my ruler's on the 1/2 inch line is measured or lined up with the side of the pocket. So we trimmed off that little piece. I'm going to flip it and do this side. Okay, that's trimmed, and then the bottom we're going to still do that 1/2 inch away. All right, and then I have some clips you can use, like Wonder clips or whatever they're called. You're going to fold this one over and just pull it tight to that pocket. And clip her down in a couple places. Now, right here in these corners, we're going to trim at like a 45-degree angle. We're just going to trim that excess off right there. And on this side as well. And that'll just make it easier for us to fold our fabric over. So clip that, and then we're just gonna fold over. This looks like a ridiculous amount of clips for one little pocket, but trust me, you need to keep these the ledges secure. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to go around the edge of the pocket just with like an 1/8 inch seam allowance and just secure this fabric to our pocket. So let's go to the sewing machine over here.
Okay, so I still have my 1/4 inch foot on. And here's my little stiletto. I don't know if you guys have a stiletto, but they're amazing. I'm just gonna get in there. We're just gonna slowly start stitching the perimeter of our pocket. Oh, you know what would be smart is if I bumped up my stitch length a little bit so that it wasn't so dim. So I have a 2.5 stitch length now. I hit at a seam, so it's a little bit awkward, but we'll make it work. Okay, and then we're gonna go across the top of the pocket. Okay, down this previous stitch line. And then across the bottom of this, just to hold it in place. there we are. There's our little pocket. Isn't she cute? Okay, let's go get her on her jeans.
Okay, let me clear up a little space real quick. There we go. So now we can clearly see where my pocket was. And so we're just going to align our pocket with where it was. And we're going to use some pins to just secure it in place. Okay. All right. Let me put one more in, just for good measure, right in the middle. Okay. So there we have our pocket. Now, when we took off our pocket, at least for these jeans, I think with like all jeans, there's 2 rows of stitching around. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at one top corner. We're going to go down, basically following our stay stitch that we did around the perimeter of the pocket. And just do that, and then come in and then do about a 1/2 inch away, do a second row. And that will secure our pocket on place. And that's it. So let's go to the sewing machine one last time.
Okay, so I'm going to take off my 1/4 inch foot and put on my A foot. And I like the A foot because, let me get my pocket here. So when you see, if you see the previous line of stitching, the center, if you align the side of the A foot up at that center, it's going to be the perfect amount of space for our second line of stitches. So we're going to try and get the underside of the jeans out of the way. All right, line up there. Drop my needle, pull it up, pull up my bobbin thread so I don't have a thread mess. Put that under. All right, I'm sorry if I bump the camera on this, but I'm gonna have to do some maneuvering. Okay, whoops, like I said, sorry about the camera. Now I'm gonna take these pins out because I don't need them anymore. My pocket is halfway sewn on. I'm sick of poking myself. Okay, so now we're gonna go straight across for a couple of stitches. We're gonna go back and then forward again. You can do a bar tack stitch there, just like there was in the, like when we took off our pocket, but I'm just gonna sew it on right now. So as you can see, I'm lining up this edge of the A foot with my previous line of stitching. Wait, don't want to sew my pants closed. Okay, guys, finish line, here we go. Flip it. Do a couple back and forths. Great, let's go back to the table.
There we have it. Our cute little pocket is done. All right, could you miter the top corners to make it neater? Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely could. Yeah, for sure. And I have to say, like my first pocket is definitely cleaner than the pocket I just did today. But I'm live on camera and I've never done this before, so it's not exactly the neatest thing. But yeah, here we go. These are our little patchwork jeans. I think they're adorable. And you know, quilts are in fashion right now. So I think this is a great way to upcycle maybe a pair of jeans that are a little out of style. Give them a fresh little update.
Thanks for joining.